Picture this. You're in a job interview and you're asked, tell me about a time you experienced conflict at work, or tell me about a time you failed. These types of questions are called behavioral interview questions or situational interview questions, and they're very common in job interviews. Today, I'm going to teach you how to answer behavioral interview questions and give you a specific formula that you can use on answering any type of question you're asked about your past experience. If you're new here, welcome, I'm Jen. And if you've been here before, welcome back. I'm an experienced hiring manager, and I want to teach you the secrets to answering questions really well in your next interview. Amazon is especially well known for asking behavioral interview questions as the primary type of question they ask in their interviews. And they're not alone. Most job interviews will include at least some behavioral interview questions. We'll talk about how to identify them and then exactly how to go about answering them. The easiest way to pick out behavioral interview questions is most of them actually don't even sound like questions. They start out with, tell me about a time, or give me an example. The reason employers like to ask these questions is because they want to know, what have you actually done in your past experience? Rather than ask a hypothetical question, what would you do in this situation? They want to know, what have you actually done in this situation? The way you've acted in the past is the best predictor of how you're going to act in the future if you're in that same situation. And if you would react differently, there's definitely room to talk about how you've acted in the past, what you learned from it, and what you would do differently next time. This is why, rather than asking you, what would you do to resolve conflict within your team, you're going to be asked instead, tell me about a time that you resolved a conflict within your team. While you can give theoretical answers to any of this, it's not really going to tell the employer much, and it's really easier if you have actual examples to talk about. Because behavioral interview questions are asking you about your actual past experience, they can be a little bit difficult to answer if you don't have that past experience or you haven't prepared for them. So how do you anticipate what questions are going to be asked so that you can take the time to prepare for them? There are a few common behavioral interview questions that you should definitely prepare for. They're likely to come up in pretty much any interview. These include leadership questions if you're interviewing for a managerial position. Tell me about a time you made a decision that was unpopular and how you handled it. These include persuasiveness questions. Tell me about a time when you motivated a low-performing employee or coworker. And success or failure questions. Tell me about a time you faced an obstacle and had to overcome it, or tell me about a time you failed. These types of questions are really common, and while they might be phrased a little bit differently, preparing for those multiple different questions will give you a good foundation for whatever specific question is asked in those areas. You can also look at the job description for clues. What topics come up repeatedly? Anticipate that you're going to be asked about your past experience in these areas. If there's a specific software that's required that is mentioned multiple times, or a specific type of work that you'll need to be performing that's referenced more than once in the job description, definitely prepare answers for your experience in these areas. There's a great way to answer behavioral interview questions no matter what that specific question is. It's generally called the s.t.a.r model, though you may see it referenced as the s.t.a.r model, especially if you're interviewing at Amazon. They actually tell you they want you to use this interview answering technique when they're preparing you to come on site for their interviews. This model works because it gives you a fixed frame to explain the context of your answer and then your answer itself. Let's take a look at each part of this model, and then we'll see it in action with an example. The first part of this model is S, or situation. Give a little context to the person that you're providing an answer to so they understand, what type of role were you in? What were the circumstances surrounding you being given a specific task to complete, or setting the scene for what you're about to describe? This should be about 1 to 3 sentences long. It doesn't need to be very long, just enough to give a general context. Next is T for task. This tends to blend with the situation, and this is why it's sometimes called the s.t.a.r model, whereas situation combines both situation and task. Here you'll talk about what were you specifically trying to accomplish in this scenario that you just set the stage for. What were you asked to do, or what were you trying to do? Remember to relate this task directly to the question that you were just asked to explain your experience around. Now it's time to talk about action. A, what action did you take? This is really one of the central pieces of your answer. Though every piece is important, this talks about specifically what did you do to impact the situation. This is the stage where you have the most influence and action that you've taken. Explaining your action well to the interviewer helps them understand your personal impact on the circumstances. Lastly is R for result. A lot of people tend to forget about this, and it is critical. What was the result of the action you took? Did it work out? Did it not work out? If it didn't work out, what did you learn from it? Would you do something differently next time? This is key to complete the small story that you're telling in answer to this question. I mentioned that behavioral interview questions are common in Amazon interviews as well as other companies. Let's take a sample question that is commonly asked in Amazon interviews and look at how to answer it in the s.t.a.r or s.t.a.r model. We'll use the common interview question, tell me about a time you faced conflict within a team and what you did to resolve it. Let's look at our sample answer. In my last role as a data analyst, I frequently worked with people across a variety of departments, often with conflicting priorities. We were designing a new product with our primary goal being to make it 50% more reliable than the last product. I handled all data analysis to analyze the weaknesses that there were in the existing product and identify opportunities to improve it in developing this new version. I predicted how the reliability would change based on the new proposed design, the materials used, and the suppliers that were selected. Each of these responsibilities fell under a different department. Since we had multiple different departments involved, they all had their own individual KPIs in addition to the primary metric we were working on for the project. Specifically, purchasing had a KPI based on the material cost of buying the part for production. This meant if we were making changes to improve the robustness that resulted in an increased material cost because we went to a new material, or if we switched to a new supplier that had a better reliability track record, that it would negatively impact their KPI, which wasn't something that the individual buyers were allowed to do. I created an analysis of the entire cost of the product to the company, not just the cost of purchasing the part, but also the cost of providing warranty on the part when it failed, and the cost of lost customers because they weren't happy with the reliability of the product. Based on this, we saw that we could actually, in some cases, pay more on the front end for a more robust product and then pay less overall because we would have fewer warranty returns and we would have happier customers. This resulted in a handshake agreement at the highest levels across multiple departments that we could accept an increase or negative impact on the purchase price KPI if it resulted in an overall product cost decrease. This let us meet our deliverables as a project by delivering a more robust product that did cost more to manufacture but resulted in a lower overall cost to the company and more satisfied customers. That answer only took me about 2 minutes or so to give, but it explained the entire context. I gave a high-level overview and provided enough detail to make it clear how my action impacted the overall result in that scenario. I was also clear what the outcome was. Notice I didn't go into a lot of detail about specifically what parts we were looking at and specifically the amount of change. These weren't important, and in some cases they're proprietary information and you may have signed a non-disclosure that you can't even share that. In general, it's better to not share it anyway, and it's not really relevant in this case. If you're asked one of the more negative tell me about a time questions, like tell me about a time you failed, make sure that you also include what you learned in that scenario. What would you do differently? You could answer this in a pretty simple way. It's as easy as saying, next time I would do blah, blah, blah instead of blah, blah, blah that I did in this past scenario. Or while this didn't turn out like I expected, I would do this differently in the future. This shows that you have taken that failure and learned from it, which is really what the question, tell me about a time you failed, is all about. It's not tell me about a time that you screwed something up, because I just want to know how you did a bad job. It's really about tell me about how something didn't turn out like you expected and what you did to correct it, or how you would do it differently. What did you learn? Everyone's going to fail at something in their career, and it's really how you react to that that's important. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and consider sharing it. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.